The text arrived at 9:47 that night. 14 words. Don't come tomorrow. It's too much trouble right now. We need space. I stared at the screen longer than I cared to admit. I had already signed the birthday card. There was a wrapped present sitting on my kitchen table, waiting for my grandson. I read the message again, hoping I had misunderstood it. I hadn't. My name is Walter Hensley, though most people call me Walt. I was 67 years old and had spent nearly 4 decades working as a licensed electrical contractor in Springfield, Missouri. For most of my life, I believed family was simple. You showed up. You kept your promises. You helped when someone needed you. I thought those things were enough. I was wrong. 2 years earlier, I had lost my wife, Eleanor, after a short battle with ovarian cancer. 38 years of marriage disappeared in a matter of months, and when she was gone, the house became painfully quiet. My son Daniel was the one person who helped fill that silence. Daniel was 34. He worked as an insurance claims adjuster in Tulsa and had always been the kind of man who avoided conflict. He wanted everyone to get along, even when that meant swallowing his own feelings. Then he married Brooke. At first, I had no reason to dislike her. She was charming, confident, and knew exactly how to make people comfortable around her. Eleanor had been more skeptical, but I told myself she was simply being protective. Then Tucker was born. My grandson arrived 2 years ago, and from the moment I held him, something inside me changed. After losing Eleanor, I thought that part of my heart had gone permanently quiet. Tucker woke it up. For his first year, I drove to Tulsa almost every month. I brought diapers, groceries, coffee filters, and little toys for Tucker. Nothing expensive. I just wanted to be present. Daniel always thanked me. Then things began changing. Sunday phone calls became missed calls. Visits were postponed. Sometimes Brooke would say Tucker was sick. Other times, she would mention that the apartment was too messy or that they had family plans. I kept making excuses for them. They're busy, I told myself. But my sister Donna didn't buy it. One afternoon, she looked directly at me and said, "Walt, this isn't about scheduling. Someone is deciding when you get to see your grandson." I laughed it off. I shouldn't have. 6 months later, I understood exactly what she meant. Daniel had invited me to Tulsa for a quiet afternoon before Tucker's birthday party. I left Springfield around 11 that morning with a small overnight bag and a wooden train set I'd bought for Tucker. It was hand-painted and cost $42. I thought he'd love it. When I arrived at the apartment complex, the temperature was 96 degrees. I sat in my truck for a moment, looking at the present on the passenger seat. Then my phone buzzed. It was Brooke. "Don't come today. Daniel isn't feeling well. It's too much trouble right now. We need some space." Something about the message felt wrong. So instead of leaving, I stayed in the parking lot. 40 minutes later, my phone rang. A man's voice said, "Mr. Hensley, my name is Roy Castellano. I manage the apartment building. I need you to come upstairs." I asked if Daniel was okay. There was a long silence. Then Roy said, "Sir, I think you should come inside." I had no idea that walking through that apartment door was about to change my entire family forever. And the worst part? I still didn't know where my grandson was. Because when that door opened, I discovered that Brooke's message wasn't asking me to give the family space. It was hiding something much more serious. I left the wooden train set in my truck and followed Roy upstairs. A woman I'd never met was standing near the neighboring apartment. She looked exhausted and angry at the same time. When she saw me, she said, You're the grandfather. Thank God. I've been trying to get someone here for 3 days. 3 days. Those words stayed with me. Roy explained that the woman, Carmen Alvarez, had contacted the property manager because she hadn't seen Daniel leave the apartment. She hadn't heard Tucker either, and mail was beginning to pile up. They had attempted to check on him, but without authorization. Roy couldn't simply enter the apartment. My name was on the paperwork. That's why he'd called me. When the door opened, the apartment was dark. The blinds were closed despite the afternoon heat, and the air smelled stale. I called Daniel's name. Nothing. Then I called for Tucker. Still nothing. I rushed through the apartment and found my son on the bathroom floor. He was barely conscious. His shirt was soaked with sweat, and beside him was an empty insulin pen. Daniel had been diabetic since he was 19. He normally managed his condition carefully, but he had apparently been alone and struggling for days. I dropped beside him and called emergency services. Carmen brought water. Roy contacted the emergency responders. Within minutes, paramedics were working on Daniel. His blood sugar was dangerously low, and he was severely dehydrated. One of the paramedics eventually looked at me and said that if we'd waited much longer, the outcome could have been dramatically different. I couldn't stop thinking about that sentence. Then I realized something even worse. Tucker wasn't there. I asked Roy where my grandson was. He didn't know. Carmen explained that she'd seen Brooke moving boxes, luggage, and a stroller into a rented SUV over the weekend. She had also heard Daniel arguing with Brooke about where she was taking their son. Suddenly, every strange moment from the previous year began making sense. The canceled visits, the unanswered calls, the sudden distance. I felt like I'd been looking at pieces of a puzzle without realizing they belonged together. Daniel was taken to St. Francis Hospital, the same hospital where Tucker had been born. By evening, his condition had stabilized. I sat beside his bed until he finally opened his eyes. He looked at me and whispered 4 words. Dad. She took him. I didn't sleep that night. Around 12:40 a.m., I called an old friend, Ray Delgado. Ray had been a Springfield police detective before retiring years earlier. He knew how to investigate without making noise, and more importantly, he knew when not to act. I told him everything. Ray listened quietly. Then he said, Walt, this didn't begin 3 days ago. You've been telling me the warning signs yourself. The visits started disappearing months ago. He told me not to confront Brooke. Don't call her family. Don't post anything online. Don't make threats. Don't give anyone a chance to destroy evidence or disappear. He wanted facts first. By the next morning, Ray was talking to Carmen. She told him that over the previous 6 months, she'd noticed Daniel becoming thinner and quieter. She'd heard arguments late at night. She'd seen Brooke leaving for hours, sometimes taking Tucker with her. Most disturbing of all, Carmen had tried calling me several times. The calls never reached me. Someone had made sure they didn't. That changed everything. Ray began pulling together the information Daniel could legally provide, and after several days, he came back with evidence that turned a painful family argument into something much darker. Because the woman who had been pushing me away from my grandson wasn't simply hiding a secret. She had apparently been building an entirely separate life behind my son's back. Ray spread everything across my kitchen table. I remember staring at the documents and wondering how someone could hide this much from a person they claimed to love. The first discovery was Brooke's job. She had lost her position as a marketing coordinator more than a year earlier. Daniel didn't know. Every weekday morning, Brooke continued dressing as though she were going to work. She would leave the apartment drive to a coffee shop, and spend the day there. To Daniel, she still had a job. She had even arranged for certain paperwork to go somewhere other than their apartment. Then we looked at the money. Daniel had been giving Brooke part of every paycheck to cover household expenses, rent, food, childcare, and other family costs. But the bank records told a different story. Over roughly 14 months, about $31,000 had gone somewhere Daniel didn't recognize. There were credit cards he didn't know about. There were expenses that had nothing to do with groceries, rent, or Tucker. And then there were the trips. Brooke had repeatedly told Daniel that she was traveling to Dallas with co-workers. But those co-workers apparently weren't part of the story anymore. The company she had supposedly worked for had already let her go. Ray traced the Dallas trips to a man named Cole Whitfield, someone Brooke had known before she ever met Daniel. The discovery hit my son harder than anything else. But then Ray pointed toward another detail. The suitcase. The one sitting near the apartment door. It contained Tucker's clothes. It also contained Daniel's diabetic supplies. At first, that might have looked like an ordinary travel bag. It wasn't. According to the evidence Ray had gathered, Brooke appeared to be preparing to leave Tulsa. She wasn't simply planning a weekend away. She had apparently been preparing for a permanent move to Dallas, and Daniel's medical supplies had been packed along with Tucker's belongings. That meant Daniel could have been left without the medication and equipment he needed. The same man who had nearly died on his bathroom floor had been cut off from the very supplies that kept him alive. I thought about the message Brooke had sent me that afternoon. Don't come today. At the time, I thought she was rejecting me. Now I understood that I might have accidentally interrupted something. If I had driven away when she told me to, Roy might never have called. If Roy hadn't called, Daniel could have remained alone. If Carmen hadn't complained about the silence next door, nobody might have realized what was happening. And if my sister Donna hadn't warned me months earlier, I might have continued believing everything was simply bad timing. I sat there looking at my son's bedroom upstairs. Daniel was asleep. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about survival. My grandson was somewhere with Brooke. My son had nearly died. And the woman I had trusted around my family had apparently been hiding money, a lost job, another relationship, and plans to leave. But there was still one question none of us could answer. Where exactly had Brooke taken Tucker? Ray looked at me and said, "Walt, we have enough to know this is bigger than we thought." I nodded. Because by then, I had learned something painful. Sometimes the person standing closest to your family is the person you need to understand most carefully. And finding Tucker was no longer a family disagreement. It was the only thing that mattered. But just when I thought we had uncovered Brooke's entire plan, Ray found one more piece of information, and it pointed directly toward the place where my grandson had been taken.